Hello, here we are again in our podcast about the year of being 70. My name is Lisette Schuitenmaker. That's because I'm Dutch. I'm based in Amsterdam, and I was invited into this venture by my childhood friend, Lucy McCarrer, who is in the UK.
Yes, I'm sorry. It's all my fault, but I'm enjoying it, and I hope you are, and maybe a few other people are who are listening to us as well. I've had some very interesting kind of feedback on, I didn't know you swore, things
That was our confessions
from our
episode.
confessions episode, yes, and I can't believe you don't like music and things. So it's interesting. Obviously, some people are listening to it, which is really nice. So last week we talked about we kind of did a review, didn't we, of the development of the technology of communication that we have experienced in our lives
During our
recently.
long, long life.
It did make, I have to say, it did make me feel, gosh, we have gone, it is a long life, isn't it? 70. But yes, so we started with old Bakelite phones and ended up with email and everything that went in between that, well, I guess most of we'd kind of forgotten in the meantime, but remembered as we went, which was interesting. So this week we're going to take a different tack and we are going to go inside. We're going to review perhaps or talk about our personal interior development and communication. So, Lisette, I think you have said previously that when you were growing up, your family was not at all religious, which is kind of unusual maybe for, I don't know, perhaps not so much in Holland, but I think in the UK, it might be seen as, in the 50s and 60s, comparatively unusual. But so what was your religious or sort of what did you feel about religious or spiritual things as a child? Can you remember?
Yes, I don't know anything about religious because my parents were not religious. And I don't know whether that was normal or not. I think we had, in the Netherlands, the South was Catholic and Protestant was north of the rivers. But I think many people did not have a religion or kind of, I think. My mother once said to me she lost faith, whatever faith she had, she lost it in the war because
Yeah.
she thought, if there is a God, how could this being have allowed the atrocities that they lived through? So my parents were like atheists. I mean, they didn't believe in anything. They didn't believe we came from anything or that we came with a purpose. They did believe you had to kind of contribute and be a good human being and be fair and honest and you know loving and kind, but then after death there was nothing either. And as a child, i I kind of lived with the fairies. Like
Oh,
we were,
lovely.
yeah, I mean, we were read these fairy tales, right? Just stories about a beings living in the woods and living with the plants, and it was like a living universe, and that felt very natural to me.
That's
Will you
lovely.
get those stories?
I'm sure, yes. I mean, we were read those stories, but also, I mean, my parents were religious. I mean, we were Church of England. We we also, as I've said before, lived in a very old-fashioned kind of household where my parents did one thing and we as children did another. But my parents went to church most Sundays, and my father, because of his job, was technically a member of the royal household. We didn't live in Buckingham Palace or
Oh
anything.
la la!
I know, I know, but it meant that they could go to the services in the Queen's Chapel and the Chapel Royal in St James's. So they would go there, and of course they didn't, weren't going to take small children with them. It was quite small. I mean,
Was
I
the
did go
queen
later,
there?
but
Was the queen there too? I have to
no,
ask.
no. Well, I don't think
She was
so.
not in her own chapel,
No, no. I
but your
don't.
parents were there
Yes,
to
yes.
represent her.
I'm not sure about that. But we used to go with our nanny to a children's service every Sunday at Chelsea Old Church. And we used to walk. And we had a lovely nanny called Beryl, who was a Baptist and very, very committed Baptist. And she would walk us to church in the snow and the ice. And she would say, "We're not fair weather Christians," you know. So we would go every Sunday. And so there was that. But she also read us the Bible every night, and she read us things like Pilgrim's Progress, or a sort of the children's version of it that I think Enid Blyton had written, called The Land of Far Beyond. And you know, we would sort of say our prayers on our knees by the bed each night. So
And did you believe? Because you went every Sunday, and
yeah,
what did that do to you? I mean,
I
was it comforting? Was it, did you feel
no.
you had sinned? What was it?
No, I mean, it wasn't Catholic, so we didn't have that, you know, we didn't have sin and confession and stuff. I loved learning the prayers. I remember hearing it once or twice and saying to my mother, "What's the thing they say with daily bread in it?" And she taught me the Lord's Prayer, "Give us this day our daily bread." So I kind of enjoyed the literary side of it, perhaps, and learning the creed and things. But no, it didn't. I really don't think it ever touched me on a spiritual level. I didn't. It wasn't something I went to for comfort
Yeah,
at
did it
all.
have like a relationship to God or a
No, I
relationship to
really don't
Jesus?
think I did. No, I don't. I mean, I believed it, but it didn't, you know, apart from the sort of the stories, the Bible stories were good, you know. I liked being read the Pilgrim's Progress and things like that, but it didn't, I don't think it touched me deeply, no.
Yeah, so I think, I don't know, I did believe in God and but I didn't know what it was. And I don't, I'm not sure how old I was, but I missed having a relationship with other beings than people. And so at some point I asked, you know, for as a present to be given the children's Bible. And my
Wow.
parents were like, well, why? I mean, that is not why would you want that? And I tried with my younger siblings as the eldest to kind of make a Sunday service, but of course that never really, I mean, it wasn't, but I wanted a moment of like introspection and silence and kind of reflection and maybe dedication. I wanted all of those things.
That's so
Whereas my siblings just, you know, wanted to go out and play hockey, do sports, you know, why all those things? So it was hard to kind of keep it up. And I think I I let go of it at some point because I just couldn't find anyone else who was as who lived in this magic world that I lived in.
that's so amazing that you had that sort of yearning, even though you didn't have any outward structure for it in your home. Was your school, were Dutch schools kind of religious based at all?
Yeah. There were, but I was not at a religiously based school. So we had like the Catholic school, and I didn't know any Catholic children because they went to a different school, and we were all, and I think to my parents it felt also like modern and liberated,
Yeah.
be their own person and make their own life, and not feeling this, you know, kind of the sinfulness of the Protestants and the ease to kind of walk with God and go to confession and then be free of it of the Catholics. I think they felt modern. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, I don't know how deeply my parents feel or felt. I mean, I sometimes talk to my mum about it a bit. I don't, but you know, it was just something you did with you know with us. We you know you went to church on Sunday, or you didn't, but you know you sort of did, and you certainly went to church at Christmas and Easter, and we sort of celebrated, obviously, well, obviously Christmas, but also Easter was quite a big deal, mainly for the Easter eggs, I have to say, in my case. But also at school we had little religious service every morning, and we'd go to church from school, and we would have a nativity play and carol services and stuff like that. So it was completely embedded, I suppose, in my life. And then I think, I just sort of, and I got confirmed when I was at boarding school. I got confirmed. I don't know if you even know what that means.
I don't, I mean, I've heard of it, but I don't know what it means like internally. I know it is kind of a ritual
Yeah.
of, kind of the first growing up and becoming, part of the flock, so to say. But what does it mean? I'm also curious when you prayed on your little knees, who did you pray to and what did you pray for? Or was it kind of rote?
It well, we had when we prayed, we kind of made up our own prayers, but I honestly cannot remember. I suppose I probably had some vision of, Jesus from pictures, or perhaps God with a long white beard. I really cannot remember having any real understanding of praying to somebody or something. And I would imagine I was praying for, kind of God bless mummy and daddy sort of
Keep them
stuff.
safe so I am safe. Yeah.
Yes, that sort of thing. I can't ever remember desperately praying for anything I wanted, like please God, let me have a puppy for my birthday. I don't think I did that sort of thing either.
Yeah.
But confirmation, I don't know. I mean, I think Catholic children get confirmed, whatever that means, quite young, and I think they're almost they sort of have a much bigger event celebration, and they kind of wear little wedding dresses, and they're sort of like
Oh,
about
yeah.
eight or nine or ten. I don't really know. It's outside my experience, but we got confirmed at school because it was just what people did. I think I was maybe 14, and I think we went on a retreat to a what do you call a nunnery? No, there's a proper word for it. It's not a
Content.
monastery. Convent, that's the word, yes.
I know the word.
Very good. For 2 days or something as a
Really?
silent-ish retreat. And I remember taking a pink notebook and trying to write some deep thoughts and really not having any deep thoughts at all. And goodness knows what happened to the notebook. And then we got confirmed and are in church in the village church near the school, and our parents came and godparents came. I had godparents, and I, honestly, again, it meant nothing to me really. It didn't. I suppose it's just becoming taking responsibility for yourself within the church as opposed to being. I think that's what it is. I may be completely wrong. Somebody will probably correct me on this, but it's sort of becoming your own adult person, I think, as opposed to being kind of looked after by godparents. I don't know. It's kind of a bit of a mystery to me now.
So I became friends with Suzanne, and she was the youngest of five, and her parents, up on marrying, had vowed to raise their children as Catholics. And this was, of course, now already the 60s, which was, 68 was such a summer of liberation and celebrating love that it didn't only come from God, but we could all love each other and solve all the world problems, of course. So we were 14 at the time, right? Or turning 14. But um, so Suzanne had to go to church and she could go Sunday morning, but she preferred to go Saturday evening. And I would, but I was a little bit older, I think 15, 16, and I was mesmerized by the whole thing. I was thought, finally, here is some kind of ritual, some kind of, singing together, mixing our voices to kind of devote. I think I'm kind of devotional, devote to a higher purpose than just having a good life.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I tried, but of course those rituals weren't mine, and you had to get up and sit down and be on your knees, and I was always kind of, oh, what now? What now? And didn't really understand it. But it was interesting. She had to go and didn't want to, and I had nothing to build from, and I wanted to.
Yeah, that's so interesting that I mean, you said it, very, when we were first talking, you said that you felt different from your family. And that's obviously another sort of, I mean, it sounds like you were different from your parents and your siblings in being someone devotional, as you say, and that's a lovely way of putting it. And yearning for that sort of spiritual
Yearning,
connection.
absolutely, absolutely. There has been no yearning in any of the other five in my family, but I surely had it. Yeah, and still have it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I mean, I suppose, and then I went very much the other way. I think when I was about 17, I think I must have been doing my A levels because I sort of connect it in my head with reading.
So tell me about, I must have done my A levels, which means
Oh,
nothing to
sorry,
anyone
sorry.
outside
Yes.
of the UK.
No, your A levels that we do here are the last 2 years of school where you do your final exams. And
Okay.
we're very specialized at that level. So we only do 3 or 4 subjects
Right,
at
right.
A level. And I did
So you're about 17, 18.
Yes, yes, exactly, exactly. And I was doing English, French, and Russian, so I was reading kind of quite nihilistic stuff in the Russian literature, and but the French existentials like Sartre and Camus, and somehow, and it wasn't because of anything specific that they said, I think, but I actually had a moment where I thought, I do not believe there's a God. I am quite clear now. There is no God. I am an atheist. That's it. And that was me for and there's nothing after death. There's no, the world is life is what it is. And that's how I stayed for, the next 20 odd years.
Wow. So there's another chapter to come. I think in the meanwhile, I was part, when I was about 17, 16, 17, 18, I was part of like the alternative crowd at school. And we were very much kind of, we weren't really hippie-ish, but touched by that thinking, which is, yeah, I think you're more a participant of life. But then I kind of gave that up and lost it. And I think part of having been depressed for so long is having suppressed this whole side of myself. And I don't believe in a God because I wasn't taught that way either. I have no one book, I have no one way, but I do believe in a purpose to this amazing universe that somehow created the circumstances through which we as conscious beings can, add to conscious awareness through our lives.
So if you lost that for a time, it sounds like there was a period when, or a time when you came back to it.
Yes, well, it was what I called my secret life. So I would, you know, I think not during my student days. I was much too preoccupied with, all the interpersonal and the whole social and all of that. But then when I lived by myself in Amsterdam, I would read like books like Initiation by Elizabeth Haig, who went through lives in Egypt and so I would be in touch with, I would be, oh, wonderful. Or I would go to workshops about reincarnation and be in touch with, former lives myself. And
Really? So you feel you've lived former lives?
well, I am not sure, but I have had very strong images of that.
So
And
can you
for
say
instance,
where you may have been in the past? Can you?
yes, so I've had images of being a little Japanese boy and a little African child. Also,
Wow.
like when I was in India, I traveled through India when I was, it must be in the 80s, when I was 30, let's say I was 30. And already I thought I would not have children. It would have still been possible, but I didn't think so. And when I was in India, I mean, you don't really speak about. So I was backpacking, going from one place to the other. and seeing all the devotional elements in Indian life, all these little temples that people would go to and bring flowers and, make beauty, and the bigger temples. And that's when I thought, well, maybe in my past life, I've had about 19 children, and this life, it's not meant to be for me. And it's not something I really discussed with people I came across, but it's like you inhale it.
That's amazing. So when did these, I don't know what to call them really, kind of visions, intimations, when did the pictures of being in past lives, when and how did they come to you?
Well, those pictures of past lives was really a dedicated workshop I think I did when I was just living in Amsterdam. So it must have been my late 20s, early 30s. And there I came across people who I really felt like close to, but I was still very much trying to become a person more in the image of my family. So I was quite closed off, and I needed therapy actually to learn a language of feeling. I needed first to be able to feel feeling, and then to distinguish it, what it actually was and where it sat in my body. I had not been educated with any of that. So it was a whole trajectory of, learning communication. We talked about the internal communication, what is actually alive in here and what wants to come to life.
How interesting. That's fascinating. Well, I had some sort of, I mean, we've talked before as well about how the age of 40 was quite a kind of change around for both of us. And obviously I got divorced and I've always had friends. Well, I have my two younger brothers are very, I mean, they are, I think it's the right phrase to use, evangelical Christians. They have always been that since they were at school. Again, a different kind of Christianity to how we were brought up, but they have, they are very powerfully sort of embedded in that. Again, I hope I'm not saying this in a in
And
the
are
wrong
they
way.
in the same kind of church, or are they in different?
They've been in the same church. There's a sort of central church in London called Holy Trinity Brompton that they have both been involved with and are probably kind of sort of partially that as well. But my one of my brothers lives in Oxford, so he presumably goes to church in Oxford, and my other brother is in London, and
Yeah.
so that they're not in the same physical churches, but I would say it's the same
Same.
conceptual church, if you like.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of also the odd one out in my family, I suppose, certainly among my siblings. But when I was getting divorced and I was probably in a bit of a mess, I've also always had other friends who were evangelical Christians. I don't know whether they they come to me or I attract them, but they suggested some of them suggested I do something that was very prevalent and goes on till this day. Do a course called the Alpha Course, and it's kind of an introduction to evangelical Christianity, and it's a sort of, I don't know, a 12-week program where you go along to it's held in many churches, and you go along once a week in the evening, and there's sort of dinner provided, and you get into groups, and you have a group leader, and it's all very, I have to say, seductive. I mean, it's very nice. It's very social. Everybody is very Christian in the sort of, everybody's very nice to the new people, and it's a kind of induction. And so I went along to that, and I really sort of enjoyed it, and I kind of stuck with going to that church for a bit. But again, it didn't hold me. I don't think I,
It was more like community and
yeah,
the structure and the kindness
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
that was nourishing to you at the time.
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what it was. So after that, I kind of I didn't sort of suddenly have another revelation where I thought, no, this is I don't believe in this anymore. I think I just gradually drifted out of it because I had never really kind of felt it again.
But isn't
So
it so interesting how some people like me are kind of given to this living, breathing, experimenting consciousness, and others like you and my siblings, my family are kind of, no, I don't think so.
yeah, yes, it is really odd, and it's clearly, but from your experience, it's not. It's nature rather than nurture. I mean,
No, no, no,
you
no, no,
were
no. I
clearly.
had it in me
Yeah,
all the time.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So but then something did happen that changed my mind, not about religion, but about the possibility or probability, I would say now, that this physical life that we experience here, that there's something else going on because I'll tell you I'll tell you what I now call my ghost story because this is completely kind of crucial to me being more accepting of other possibilities. We moved into the house I'm in, which is in a very old farmhouse. It was built in 1650, the central bit of it, and in Norfolk, in a village. It's probably 22 years ago now. And my friend who is psychic, whatever that means, he hears things, talks to people, sees things for people who have died, essentially. So I don't know what the word is. We sort of call them ghosts, and I know you don't particularly like that word, but and I mean, I've never disbelieved his experiences, but nothing has ever touched me like that. I've never felt anything like that, and nothing through him or anybody else has ever kind of come to me. But he came to stay to see our new house, and this was it was in the middle of the summer. It was very hot, but we'd had dinner. We'd also had a bit of red wine to drink. And there was this massive thunderstorm outside, kind of summer thunderstorm with cracks of lightning and thunder. And Mike suddenly turned to me and said, "Lucy, there's someone here who wants to talk to you." I was like, "Oh, this is this is interesting, weird." And he talked for about 40 minutes, I'd say. And it was like, when you see
So
interpreters
he
in big,
spoke, so that person
that
spoke through
person
him.
was speaking to him and he gave a name. He was called Ernest, but he was always known by his short name. He had never lived in our house. He was not haunting our house. He wasn't here, but he had lived in the village. He had seen that I had come to live in the village, and I mean, I can remember these words exactly. He was tickled that I had come because he thought that I could help him clear his name from something he'd been accused of in 1945, and he'd had to leave the village, and he hadn't done it, and he wanted me to, which is it seems so ridiculously specific and
And
ludicrous.
Mike could
And
not know any of these things
Mike couldn't
from,
possibly know any of it. I didn't know any of it. And, there were other details like names and, I mean, not sort of, name, surname, but, certain names. I mean, there was the name Pat was mentioned, who I thought was a woman. Turned out later there was a Pat in this story, but he was a man. He said where he was in the churchyard. He said that people from the church would be able to help me find him, and a whole load of other stuff. But it was I still didn't know what he'd been accused of and what he wanted help with. So it was all very fascinating. Of course, I was very flattered to be picked out by this spirit, if you like, this man who,
spirit. I like that word. Yes,
yes,
the
spirit,
spirit
yes.
being. Yeah.
Exactly. So the next day, I went for a walk with the dog and looked around the churchyard, and I was just about to leave when I suddenly saw this little gravestone. Well, it wasn't. It was because he'd been cremated. In fact, it was a very little stone in the ground, and it had his name and it had dates when he had died, and he would have been in his early 30s in 1945. So, it kind of fitted, but here was this man and his name and surname. which was like, and then I really kind of got shivers through me, and called Mike and said, I found him. But then I could not find out any more. I asked around the village, I asked older people if they'd known this man, if they knew the name, if something had happened. And I asked for ages and nothing happened. And I couldn't find anything. And then my daughters were then going to the local village school, and they had I think it was a 150-year centenary or something of the school, and they had a display of all the old records and books and things. And I was just flicking through one of these old books, and it happened to be the records, school records of 1945. And there was this man's name again, and he had a daughter at the school, and it said 1945. It also had his address and things like that. It said 1945, left to go to Wimbledon. That's in London. So that was like, oh my goodness, this is ridiculous. So then I told someone, and they said to me, look, why don't you?
I have a question here, because when you say this is ridiculous, this is like the voice of normality.
Yes,
This can't
yes,
possibly be. This is all ridiculous. The voice that wants us to be under straight and narrow and not kind of be strange. And so,
exactly.
but was there another part of you?
Yes,
Because
yes, there's much more. Well, I then sort of started. I mean, I told my kind of local friends, and somebody said, "Why don't you put an article in the church magazine and see what happens?" So I did. I wrote the story and I submitted it to the church magazine. And the next day after it came out, I was contacted by two people. One was my ghost, as I call him, his son, who lived in Barbados, was a priest in Barbados, and had come back to Bunwell for a visit, very rare visit, and had read this. And the other
I
was,
so love it.
it's
In
great, isn't
my
it?
language, this is the angels are really working hard to bring, to help this earnest come to completion. And so they kind of nudge you here and there. And then this visit is like,
It
wow,
was, yeah,
awesome at work to organize all this.
yes, yes. And then I was called by his nephew, who was called Pat. And so they told me I mean, the same story from two very different perspectives. His son said he was a lovely man. He never did anything. He was a great father. He was a terrific husband. Yes, we did move in 1945. I don't really know why, but we had to move and we didn't want to move. And I was very upset. And so were my siblings because we loved Bunwell. And we moved to London, and that was a great sadness for all of us. And the nephew told me that Ernest had been a real character. He had come to Bunwell in the war. He had he'd taken sort of fresh farm produce and sold it in London on the black market. But he had met a girl in Bunwell and fallen in love, and he had come back. He had eventually married her. She had a son out of wedlock, who was the son who contacted me. He didn't
Mm,
mention this at all.
mm.
Ernest had adopted him, and then they'd had other children, and those were the children in the school records. But Ernest was a wheeler dealer, he called him. He was a spiv, and he said he wore
What's
kind
the
of pin,
spiv?
sorry, strange English word. It's a kind of kind of post-war or wartime expression for a chancer, a kind of somebody who's a salesman, a kind of someone
Who
who'll
sees
go
an
out.
opportunity and takes it.
Yeah, yes,
There's
exactly.
no real strategy. There's no method to the thing.
No, and the kind of image that comes up is someone in a very sharp pinstripe suit, and maybe a hat and it's sort of
Elegant and smooth.
elegant and smooth. And so Pat told me that Ernest had they had had his father-in-law, the father of this girl he'd married, was the richest man in the village, had lots of land, owned a mill, owned farms and stuff, and he thought that Ernest had perhaps got him to invest in some of his business opportunities or something like that, because when the father, who was wonderfully called Cornelius Ram, died in 1945, there was money missing in his estate. He'd never made a will. He died intestate, and there was not. And my guess is I never got. I mean, I've spoken to many members of Ernest's family now, and nobody knows the exact story. But my guess is, and this is what I wrote up into a novel, was that Ernest was accused of taking money from his father-in-law and depleting the estate, and they kind of forced him out of the village with his wife and children.
Mm.
And that was what he'd been accused of. And my novel told a story that said they were wrong. He hadn't done that because I believe that
So this
that's
is a
what.
great novel to read. Tell us the name of your novel,
Oh,
Lucy.
thank you. It's called Kindred Spirits, but it's not.
Kindred.
It's not actually in print at the moment. So it's. I mean, you can get hold of it on Amazon, but
Yeah.
yeah, I can. I
So the
can.
spirit, as I would, say, you would say to ghosts, but a spirit really sought completion and rehabilitation
Yeah,
and was happy to find you because you are a persistent
persistent eldest
person,
daughter.
persistent eldest daughter, and you turn out to be a bit of a Miss Marple.
Yes, it was fascinating. It took 2 or 3 years to put all this together and meet people and find people. I sent up for his death certificate
Yeah.
and his father-in-law's
So,
will and or lack of will, and it was very, very fascinating, the whole thing.
so
But
what did this do to your belief that there's nothing after death?
well, I my belief is now that there must be something because this could not have come to me in any other way. That, even there's nobody alive who could have known all this, and yet it's clearly there is truth in it, and this was a real person. And annoyingly, he's never come back. I've kind of asked Mike to sort of
Hasn't
see if he
he
can
hasn't come
contact
back to
him, but
thank you.
yeah.
Maybe you kind of sent him off into another realm and it's very difficult to contact you.
Yes,
You're
well, maybe
being
he
very
got
difficult.
closure from that, and he doesn't need.
It's maybe not,
Yeah, maybe it's not possible. That's interesting. That's interesting. But I mean, another
yeah,
thing that
because it is
happened.
hard for spirits to reach us, and very often we are so busy with our lives that we are not really open to
No,
signals that they send. We just zoom by, whiz by on our way to the supermarket, whereas they've laid it all out. Like this was kind of laid out with the sun, happened to be there, happened to see the newspaper and all of that. How amazing is that? So
yeah,
I think we get many things all through the day, and we just don't see them. We're not sensitive enough, and we
no.
can learn to be more sensitive and pick up clues. And
Yes, I would
also,
love to
in
be
my
more
view,
sensitive,
it's
but I don't. I can't find a way to be more sensitive. I mean, certain members of my family are sensitive, and they see. There are. I'll call them ghosts again, spirits if you like, but there are people who live in our who have
kindred
previously.
spirit. You didn't call them kindred ghosts, you called it kindred
That's
spirits.
very true. But there are people who live in our house, and different people have told me they've seen them. And there is a little girl and a maid who are from the same period and wear the same clothes. And
But
um,
what does this do to you if we talk about our inner life and our inner communication? Because shifting from thinking we come from nothing, we have a life as it is, make the best of it, and then we go nowhere, is a very different inner view from thinking maybe we come from somewhere, maybe this has a purpose, our life has a purpose, and then we go somewhere else where maybe there are different realms or different vibrations in how, materialized or etheric we are. I mean, what does that do to your,
well,
daily life or your worldview?
it certainly changed my perception of my worldview. And whereas I'd completely discounted the idea of an afterlife, and I mean, certainly heaven and hell, were and I don't kind of go back there. But that there is more. I mean, I suppose the way I rationalize it perhaps is that all this is perfectly explicable. We just do not yet have the explanation. We don't know enough.
Yeah,
We,
that's the ratio. Why? Yeah, I'm so interested how the mind has been put as a force over all our other senses. When you come
yeah,
into a room, we immediately sense the atmosphere. If the atmosphere
yeah,
is tense, we don't sense that through our mind. We may rationalize it and think, oh, something has happened. Let's get on with the show. But when we pay attention to, things we pick up through our other senses, this so enriches life. So we can rationalize and say science hasn't proved it so. And in a way, the whole quantum science is a science of infinite
yeah.
possibility, gelling into form.
Yes, and that's what I sort of believe in, I suppose, if I can put it that. I mean, I don't seem to have any ability to. I mean, I'm very, very keen on intuition. I think I have a very, sort of I totally believe in my own intuition, as you say, rather than, kind of intellectual, and certainly going into rooms and having intuitions about people and sometimes insights into their experience that they haven't told me, but I somehow kind of know.
Aha. So here's a psychic right here.
But I don't seem to be able
This,
to. I mean, I'd kind of love the idea of being able to see ghosts or talk to ghosts or spirits or,
well, I
contact
would
people
say
on the
just
other
do it.
side. But
Just don't wait for them. Don't wait for the phone to ring. Pick up the phone and talk to whoever you want to talk to and experience that
well, it's
conversation.
funny. I do sometimes try to, and then I mean, I have done often, sort of talk to my father or other people who have died, and I sort of feel like sometimes thoughts come back, but I distrust them, and I think it's just me making
Well,
stuff
that's
up.
ratio again. That's ratio who wants to keep it all, straight and narrow. This is kind of enough. So I think, to broaden that road and have a much broader spectrum and say, well, a thought comes back. How interesting. Well, how does it make me feel? Does it make me feel in connection? Isn't that then just a better story?
Yeah. Yes, yes, no, no, I agree. I mean, I just, I somehow feel that I'm not feeling things that other people like you who have this ability, that you know how to do it and
Have an
I don't.
interest. I have an interest, and I went, for 4 years to the Barbara Brennan School to gain more faith in those knowings, exactly the ones that you describe. You come into a room, some of people's stories. I mean, it's all in our field, in our vibration, and you can pick it up. And you can either say, oh, well, I can't really, or act on it, which I think you do, or kind of say, wow, that is so interesting. I'd like to know more. And then we have to learn everything. I learned how to feel more inside, and I'm not a highly sensitive person. I don't leave my body easily, and
Well,
see.
if you leave
I'm
your
not.
body at all, that's amazing.
Uh,
I have never had an out of body experience. Sounds
yeah, I've had. It's not so comfortable, actually.
No, no, no. I
You-
wonder if I'm actually a bit scared of it all. And though I think I would love to see the maid and the little girl who live in our house and the other man who everybody also, well, I say everybody, but the psychic among my friends and family who all see. And I think I'd love to see them. And then I think,
Hmm.
maybe actually I'd be quite terrified if I did. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I've never thought of those things, I think, as terrifying
No.
because one of well, this is a confession maybe. Sometimes I can't remember whether a person has died or hasn't because I feel the same distance to them or
Wow.
nearness to them. I mean, I know my father died in 2008 and my mother died in 21, but with some people a little further afield, are they alive? Are they? I don't know because they're still kind of here. They kind of linger. And yeah. I've always been curious about death. I think, it's wonderful to be dead and to be part of wholeness again and not live in this difficult world of duality.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, it is fascinating, and somebody else in my family who sees our spirits in our house also has visitations from people, and I don't disbelieve that at all. And I think it's lovely, and I've told my mum when she goes, please come and talk to this person so I know where you are and tell us what it's like.
Yeah.
Whether that's possible, I don't know, but I would, I'm hoping that will, if I can't do it myself, if I can't, communicate with her post death, then somebody else will be able to.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I do believe that is now possible, which I didn't for a long, long
Yeah.
time.
So I wrote, it's a book that only came out in Dutch. It's called Weduwen, Hoe werkt dat? There's a chapter there that I had not planned, but that came because of the stories I heard from women who lost their beloved, their partner. And they told me of radios, switching on in rooms they seldom
Yeah,
were with their favorite song.
yeah,
Very, very direct. I call them, postcards. They're like
yeah.
postcards from the other side.
Yes, that's lovely. Yes. Yes, our little girl apparently does that. I mean, and several people have, experienced this. She's playful. She likes to play. She'll ruffle somebody's hair. She'll move things around. Only light things, because presumably
Yeah,
they
yeah, yeah,
don't.
yeah, yeah. No, they don't have a body to do it. They need
No.
to do it with, kind of a spirit power to spirit something away.
Yeah. Yes, 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 of
Say in your
course.
wonderful language.
Yeah.
Well, what a lovely topic. I love talking about these things.
Well, perhaps we will return to it another time.
Yes.
But yes, it is fascinating, isn't it? Endlessly fascinating.
Yay. So this was our episode 14 already.
Yes, and we have talked about our journey through spiritual life through our 70 years and how it's changed for both of us.
Yes. Yes. And we will be back next week.
We will indeed. Bye
Okay.
for now,
Bye.
Lisette and
Bye.
everybody. Bye.